for Carla, or a question for Carla. I noticed that several times during your speech that you had referenced different points in time where you weren't sure of particular aspects of this, where there was a little doubt, and that kind of seemed to open the door for other explanations. You didn't really go forward. You referenced one from Aquinas, but when you look historically at all the different times when we had a lack of understanding, especially for kind of scientific sort of things, whether it was electricity or molecular structure, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, each time those sort of sayings and beliefs were bandied about. And does it give you cause or any kind of pause for to kind of reflect and say, well, you know, this could also be that sort of occurrence again when you don't know?
I would hope so. I would hope so. I would hope that theologically and philosophically we can all have enough humility to say that this is constantly emerging, that this is developing, and that we do not have all the angles on it. I don't think we have all the angles on sexual orientation. I don't think we have all the angles on adult stem cell. I don't think we have all the angles on black holes. I don't think we have all the angles on dark energy. But for heaven's sake, if we could at least have the humbleness to say, well, maybe we can learn something. And I think that has to be said theologically, not just philosophically, but theologically, that many of our understandings of this relationship between what I call the sacred or the holy, this mystery, theologically, you know, most people will say, well, you're taught Trinity. Just Trinity, God is Trinity. I work with Muslims and Jews, and they say, you know, what's with this? You've got three gods, right? Or at least your God has three heads, right? And there's very few of us from the Christian tradition who can explain the Trinitarian reality, because we don't understand it. We don't know what to do with it. But we can sit with ourselves, and this is going back again to Ben's reflections. We can sit within ourselves and know that we are a mystery, even to ourselves. If you really understand yourselves, let me touch you. And that we've got thoughts. And if we don't open our mouths, I'm not going to know what you're thinking, and you're not going to know what I'm thinking. But when I speak a word, that's still me. That's still me. And when I do something about my words, when I interact with you, that's still me. There are not three of me. But we cannot make that transference and say that in the mystery of the holy, there is the mystery, there is the word expressing the mystery, and there is the dynamism that, for my purpose, is probably behind the Big Bang. But we falter because we don't have words. We don't know how to take these concepts and say, these concepts are not opposed to what's happening scientifically. We need to change our language. Our language is stale. Much of our religious language is very stale.
I want to comment on this. You were talking about how naturalistic explanations have basically won all of, for all intents and purposes, all of the things that people thought were magical or had to do with gods or supernatural powers or anything. Either we couldn't confirm it, or it was disconfirmed, or a better, an actual naturalistic explanation kicked in and, was able to convince, a worldwide scientific community about that. And so even though that's true, and that gives us the inference to naturalism whenever we're at the face of yet another unknown, we're like, well, is this too a naturalistic explanation? we can say probably, because that's, reasonable. But in the event, I mean, it's important to still ask, well, what would count as evidence against that position? Because, it's possible that there's 99 natural things and one supernatural thing of some sort. And so, I mean, since that logical possibility is there, I mean, that is typically the challenge to people that believe that there is something else other than physicalness going on in the mind, is you could measure that has potential consequences. You can say, well, if we can show that there's some kind of sophisticated physical effect going on in the brain that has no prior physical cause, that would be some kind of evidence for some kind of dualism. And so, now, from my standpoint, I don't like, that'd be like a video game. Like you have a hollow entity running around doing all sorts of crazy things, and you look inside and there's just, there's nothing under the hood. So, okay, well, that's the magic of the computer world. From my standpoint, I don't believe the category of immaterial things is coherent. I think that something that lacks dimensionality is logically impossible. For example, when 10, 15 years ago, whenever it was, when Stephen Hawking was telling everybody about the singularity, I was thinking to my 16-year-old young Earth creationist self, well, that's impossible, because singularities, by definition, aren't anything. So you can't be talking about a singularity. It has no dimension. So obviously he doesn't ask 16-year-old young Earth creationists. And then, but then he turned everything around and started convincing everybody, oh, well, I was wrong about that. Yeah, y'all believe me. But in fact, now they're fudging the very beginning of the Big Bang and talking about multiverses and stuff like that. So I was pretty certain that a singularity was impossible. And I'm basically equally certain that immaterial things are impossible too, for basically the same reason. That's just part of the definition. Humans made up the category. There's no, by definition, no physical evidence of immaterial things. So it's kind of a non-starter as a concept for me. But, we could live in some kind of matrix or something, so if sophisticated effects are happening, that's still evidence for something. That's still interesting evidence. There could be some other kind of version of religion or something that's mechanical in nature, or just has more layers of reality than we're currently aware of.
Don't take the red pill, by the way.
Right. Oh, did you want to?
I'd like to just comment, that's where we differ, because I consider that a form of reduction. That when it's brought down to naturalism, it's a form of reduction, and that is to me a scrunching of reality. Reality is expansive, and it is, by our dimension, it is not measurable. It is not. It is by our known dimensions. That's where I would step outside and say, there is something more. I've got to allow for something more and not reduce. That's what I talk about, being open-ended.